Think about the absolute bedrock of Western thought, philosophy, and mathematics. Two names probably pop into your head almost instantly: Socrates and Pythagoras. Their ideas literally built the world we live in. But here is a genuinely mind-bending historical paradox for us to kick off this explainer with. Neither of these brilliant men ever wrote a single book. Not one scroll, not a manuscript, zero. For figures whose legacies have absolutely dominated human history for over 2 millennia, they left behind absolutely no written words of their own.
So you really have to wonder, why? Because this definitely wasn't an accident. Was this absence of text just a lack of ability? Were they just too busy? Well, the historical sources we're exploring today make it incredibly clear that it was neither. Their refusal to write was a deliberate, profound, and deeply philosophical choice. They fundamentally distrusted the written word. But as we'll see, they distrusted it for completely different reasons.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core contrast between these two giants. Take Pythagoras, for instance. His motivation for not writing was all about preserving the sacred. He firmly believed knowledge was this mystical, almost dangerous power that had to be protected from the uninitiated. Now contrast that with Socrates. His refusal to write was entirely about preserving the truth. He believed that truth was alive, it was dynamic, and that writing it down essentially killed it. So we have two brilliant minds taking two totally different philosophical paths that somehow lead to the exact same decision: never pick up a pen.
Section 1. Pythagoras, the secretive mystic. Okay, first things first. Forget the image of a boring math teacher just drawing triangles on a chalkboard. Pythagoras actually operated in a shadowy, elite, underground world. To his followers, he wasn't just a philosopher, he was literally a gatekeeper to cosmic secrets. Historical discussions frequently link him to the traditional priesthood of Apollo. He was viewed as an iatromantus, which is a type of shamanic healer, magician, and prophet in ancient Greece who is attributed with godlike powers. This is a man deeply embedded in the occult and the mystical, operating in an era where the lines between science, magic, and religion, they simply didn't exist.
Because of this highly mystical worldview, his school operated way more like a secretive cult, and the requirements for his followers were intense. They had to take strict vows of silence. Traditions say that Pythagoras actually spent years in ancient Egypt, gathering esoteric, highly advanced knowledge. And the consensus among ancient historians is that this information was considered far too explosive, too sacred to ever be written down where it could fall into the wrong hands. His followers literally went underground, learning in these subterranean incubation shrines, just to receive his wisdom.
To understand just how seriously they took this secrecy, we can look at the writings of the historian Plutarch. He records instances of Pythagorean followers, like a man named Theanor, making these incredibly long journeys just to perform secret night rituals and offer libations at the hidden tombs of past masters, like the elder Lysias. These rituals were done in the dead of night, based on vivid dreams and visions. For them, writing down these doctrines wouldn't just be a simple mistake. It would be the ultimate betrayal of their sacred vows, punishable by exile or, honestly, even worse.
Section 2. Socrates, the public interrogator.
Now let's pivot sharply away from the shadowy underground cult of Pythagoras and step right into the blazing sunlight of the Athenian Agora. Enter Socrates. He was hyper-public, completely democratic, and lived his entire life out in the open, engaging in constant daylight conversations with literally anyone who would listen. So, if he was so open, why didn't he write? We find the answer in a text by his student Plato, called the Phaedrus. Socrates argued that writing is an entirely inadequate way to pass on knowledge, because a text only tells what it contains, and nothing more. For Socrates, a written text was a dead thing. If a student doesn't understand a book, the book can't explain itself in a new way, right? It can't adapt to the student's soul. It just rigidly repeats the exact same words forever.
So the crucial takeaway here is that for Socrates, the true art of the philosopher, the goal of actually leading human souls to the good, could only happen through dynamic, live dialogue. True learning requires face-to-face cross-examination. You simply cannot have a dynamic conversation with a piece of papyrus. It's literally like trying to argue with a brick wall. True learning requires a teacher who can read the room, adjust their arguments on the fly, ask probing questions, and actively guide you to a realization.
But, and this is fascinating, Socrates had a mystical side too, though it was very different from Pythagoras. Plutarch's texts describe how Socrates was guided by a Daimonion, which is a sort of divine sign or an inner voice, but Plutarch clarifies it wasn't a physical voice at all. He describes ordinary human speech as a blow to the soul. It's air, molded by sound, forcibly entering through your ears. but Socrates' intellect was so pure that it could receive a voiceless mental touch from a higher being. His mind was guided directly by divine thought, completely bypassing that clumsy, violent blow of spoken words. If even spoken words were sometimes considered too coarse for pure truth, written words, absolutely out of the question.
And yet, here is the ultimate historical irony. We only know about Socrates' deep philosophical hatred for the written word because his devoted student, Plato, flat out disobeyed that very philosophy and wrote it all down. We only have access to Socrates' brilliant defense of his life, his cross-examinations, and his incredible thoughts on the soul because they were captured in Plato's Apology, using the exact medium Socrates argued was dead and useless.
Through this written defense, we actually get to see the reality of how his unwritten life played out. Instead of writing, he just lived his philosophy. He publicly roasted those who pretended to be wise to prove their wisdom was actually worth nothing. He engaged the youth of Athens without ever taking a dime. And he prioritized the truth right up until the very end, accepting a death sentence rather than abandoning his philosophical mission.
Section 3. The Irony of Plato's Pen.
This brings us to a really fascinating synthesis of these two great minds. Pythagoras and Socrates both utilized distinct oral traditions, one rooted in profound elite secrecy and the other in vibrant public interrogation. Both men actively chose to bypass writing to protect what they valued most, yet the unwritten became the very foundation of all written philosophy. Think about it. If Pythagoras and Socrates had entirely gotten their way, their ideas would have vanished into thin air the second they were spoken, totally lost to time forever. It was only because their followers eventually broke the mold, because people like Plato and later Pythagorean scholars picked up a pen and meticulously documented these oral traditions that we even know about their unwritten philosophies today. Their absolute refusal to write actually sparked some of the greatest writings in human history.
Which leaves us with something pretty massive to think about today. We live in an era of infinite text. We are constantly typing, texting, scrolling, and reading off screens. But looking back at the deliberate, thoughtful choices of Pythagoras and Socrates, we have to ask ourselves, in our obsession with writing every little thing down, have we lost the art of the dynamic, face-to-face, philosophical conversation? Have we traded the living, breathing search for truth for a digital sea of dead text? It's definitely a question worth logging off and actually talking to someone about.